It started like any ordinary Saturday morning. The sun had barely risen, the birds were chirping, and I was enjoying a fresh cup of coffee on my front porch. My house sat peacefully at the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was nothing fancy, just a modest two-story home with a small, well-kept lawn out front that I took pride in. For years, I had planted flowers along the walkway, trimmed the grass regularly, and even added a tiny white fence to mark the border of my yard. To me, it was more than a lawn, it was a symbol of home. That morning, as I sipped my coffee and flipped through the local newspaper, I noticed something unusual out of the corner of my eye. A woman, mid-50s, short blonde bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, and walking like she owned the entire block, was standing right in the middle of my front lawn. I had seen her around before. She lived a few houses down. Her name was Karen, and yes, she lived up to every stereotype associated with that name. She didn't see me at first. She was walking slowly across the grass like she was inspecting it. Then she took out her phone, snapped a few pictures, and even leaned down to examine a small flower bed I had planted near the fence. I stood up slowly and approached her, trying to be polite. "Morning," I said. "Can I help you with something?" Karen turned around sharply, clearly startled. Then she gave me a fake smile and said, "Oh, I was just checking on my lawn. It looks like someone's been planting flowers on it without asking." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "Your lawn?" I asked. "You mean this one?" She pointed to the entire patch of grass that stretched from my driveway to the sidewalk. "Yes," she said confidently. "This whole front yard. It's actually part of my property. I don't know why you've been maintaining it, but it belongs to me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Karen lived here for 7 years. That's my mailbox, my fence, and this grass is part of my deeded property." Karen gave a little laugh. "Well, there's been a mistake somewhere. I had a property survey done recently, and it shows that this lawn is technically mine. I've been meaning to correct it, and I think it's time you stop treating it like it's yours." At this point, my blood started to boil, but I kept my cool. "Do you have this survey?" I asked. "Because I have mine too, and I'm pretty sure you're mistaken." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "I'll bring it later, but for now, I'd appreciate it if you stopped planting things here and trimming the grass. I'll take care of it from now on." I couldn't believe it. Not only was she trying to claim my lawn, but she was now ordering me not to care for it. I told her calmly that unless she showed me actual proof, I wasn't going to stop doing anything. She huffed and stormed off down the sidewalk, mumbling something about calling the HOA. That night, I checked my home documents and pulled out the original survey from when I bought the house. It clearly marked the front yard as part of my property, but something about Karen's behavior told me this wasn't over. So the next morning, I installed a couple of small outdoor security cameras, one facing the front lawn and another covering the driveway. I didn't want to cause drama, but I needed evidence in case things escalated. For a few days, things were quiet, but then I started noticing subtle changes. One morning, walked out to find the flower bed near the fence had been dug up. My small solar lights were gone, and my trash bin had been moved from the side of the house to near the curb. At first, I thought it was kids playing pranks, but when I checked the footage from the cameras, my jaw dropped. There she was, Karen, early in the morning, dressed in workout clothes, sneaking onto my lawn. First, she yanked the solar lights from the ground and stuffed them in a plastic bag. Then she took a small hand shovel and dug into the flower bed, removing the bulbs I had just planted. She looked around nervously, then walked back down the street to her house, like nothing had happened. I saved the footage, dated and time-stamped, and sat back in disbelief. This woman was seriously unhinged. I showed the video to a couple of my neighbors, and their reactions were all the same: shock and laughter. "She's done weird things before," one of them said, "but this is next level." Still, I decided not to confront her just yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. And sure enough, within a few more days, things escalated. She came back again, this time with a measuring tape and a clipboard. She walked along the edge of the lawn, muttering to herself, writing things down, and even placing small white flags in the grass. I watched all of it from inside while my camera captured every second. Later that evening, I received a letter in my mailbox. It was from Karen, handwritten. It said, "Dear neighbor, per my recent property evaluation, this letter is a formal request for you to stop using the front yard space that encroaches on my property. I will begin maintaining it myself starting this week. Thank you for understanding." She even signed it, Karen S. That was the last straw. I printed out the footage, highlighted the timestamp, attached a copy of my property survey, and sent it all to the HOA. I also sent a copy to the local police station, not as a formal complaint, but just to have something on record in case she got any ideas. I didn't hear anything back for a few days, but then something surprising happened. I received a visit from an HOA representative. He said he had reviewed the documents and videos I sent and wanted to assure me that my lawn was definitely mine. But there was more. Apparently, I wasn't the only neighbor Karen had tried to mess with. She had pulled similar stunts before, arguing over fence placements, claiming sidewalks were hers, and even once telling a delivery driver not to park near her curb. The HOA decided to issue Karen a formal warning. They also requested a community meeting to discuss her behavior and set clear property lines. But before that could even happen, Karen returned bold as ever. She stood in the middle of my lawn again, with a garden hose, watering the grass, like she owned it. I walked outside with my phone, recording everything. "Karen," I said loudly, "this is being recorded. I've submitted everything to the HOA. You are on private property right now." She froze, hose still running, and stared at me. "You don't have to be so dramatic," she snapped. "I'm just watering my grass," I replied calmly. "Karen, you're trespassing. I have proof. I have footage. And I've already spoken to the HOA and police." That seemed to rattle her. She turned off the hose, mumbled something I couldn't hear, and marched off. But the story wasn't over yet. I stood in silence as Karen took a step onto my lawn like she owned it. She raised her phone again, pretending to record me, but I noticed her finger wasn't even on the record button. This wasn't about documentation, this was performance. A show of power, a bluff. But she didn't know what I had running quietly in the background. My actual security cameras, tucked discreetly under the eaves of the house, capturing everything in crystal clarity. But I wasn't ready to escalate. "Not yet." I simply asked, as politely as I could manage, "Could you please step off the lawn?" She scoffed. "It's my lawn," she snapped, then added, "Your little grass patch crosses over the property line. It always has. And if you don't move that flower pot by tomorrow, I will have it removed." I had lived in this neighborhood for 6 years. Not once had anyone ever brought this up. Karen, on the other hand, had just moved in 6 weeks ago. And yet, here, she was telling me that my lawn was somehow hers. She turned and walked off without waiting for a response, muttering something under her breath that I couldn't catch. After she went inside, I stood still for a moment, feeling my blood boil under my skin. I had heard stories about neighbors like this, the kind that think their voice is law, but experiencing it firsthand was different. It felt personal. It felt like a challenge. That evening, I held up the footage. The cameras had caught everything: her standing on my grass, her claims, even her face when she declared, "It's mine." I saved the clip and backed it up in 3 different places. Something told me I might need it soon. The next morning, I stepped out to water the plants and found a surprise. My ceramic flower pot, the one sitting neatly on my side of the walkway, had been smashed. Not knocked over, not cracked, smashed. Pieces were scattered across the lawn like shrapnel. I stared at the mess, stunned. I knew right away who had done it. There was only one person with a motive, but proving it was another story, or so I thought. I went back inside and rewound the footage. And there she was, Karen at 14 a.m. in her bathrobe, creeping over the property line with a flashlight in one hand and something heavy in the other. She crouched beside the flower pot, looked around nervously, and then bam, she slammed it against the stone pavers. Not once, not twice, 3 times until it broke. Then she hurried back to her house like a thief in the night. I sat back in my chair, stunned by the sheer pettiness. She wasn't just arguing boundaries anymore, she had stepped into full-blown vandalism. The smart thing would have been to go straight to the police, but part of me wanted to confront her, to give her a chance to admit it, maybe even to apologize. So the next afternoon, I waited for her to come outside. I didn't have to wait long. She emerged wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a leash with her tiny white dog, the same one that always did its business on my lawn without her ever cleaning up after it. "Karen," called out. "We need to talk." She rolled her eyes but walked over. "If this is about your flower pot, I have no idea what happened. Could have been kids. You know how they are." I just smiled. "Funny you say that, because my cameras caught someone smashing it." Her expression didn't change much, but there was a flicker, just a flicker of something. "Worry maybe." "Oh, you have cameras?" she asked, feigning surprise. I nodded. "Yes, hidden ones. Full color, night vision, very clear images." She blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Her dog barked once. "I'd like to offer you the chance to explain," I said, keeping my tone even. She crossed her arms. "I didn't do anything, and if you accuse me of something I didn't do, that's harassment. I can call the HOA." And there it was, the threat. The homeowners association, her favorite imaginary weapon, but this time it was her bluff. That was falling apart. "I don't think the HOA would like to see what you did," I replied calmly. "But the police might be even more interested." She flinched. Actually flinched. Then she tried to pivot. "Well, maybe if you didn't put your stuff over my line, none of this would have happened." I took a step forward and pointed to the side of the yard. "Karen, there's a boundary marker right there, that little metal peg in the ground. And I have the survey from when I bought the house. Your claim isn't just wrong, it's nonsense. And if you keep this up, I will report you." For a moment, there was silence. Her dog looked up at her, confused. Then she turned sharply and walked away, dragging the leash behind her. "You'll be sorry," she hissed. "You just wait." And I did. I waited, because now, it wasn't just about a lawn. It was about principle, about standing your ground when someone tries to bully you off it. That night, I went online and printed 3 signs. One said, "Private property, trespassers will be recorded." The second said, "Cameras monitored 24/7." The third, "Neighbor dispute, documented and reported." I laminated them, staked them into the edge of the lawn, and pointed the cameras right at the property line. By morning, Karen had seen them. I knew because she stormed over with a folder in her hand, waving papers. "These are my property records," she shouted. I stayed calm. "Great. Let's compare them to the county records." That stopped her, because deep down, she already knew. I wasn't going to be the neighbor who got pushed around. I was the neighbor who had receipts. The next morning, woke up to the sound of footsteps and soft scraping. I checked the time, it was barely 6:30 a.m. I got up, pulled the curtain aside, and sure enough, Karen was back. This time, she had gardening gloves on, a small shovel in hand, and she was kneeling right in the middle of my lawn. She was digging something. At first, I thought she might be pulling weeds or trying to damage the grass again, but no, she was planting something. I couldn't believe it. She was actually trying to landscape my lawn. Who does that? I grabbed my phone and started recording from inside the house. Then I stepped outside. The moment she saw me, she stood up straight and tried to act casual. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Just fixing up my property. I don't like the way the city left it. You've done a horrible job with it." I told her plainly that this wasn't her property. She shrugged and said, "Well, I've spoken to the neighborhood committee, and they agree that this lawn technically falls into a gray area." That was an outright lie. There was no neighborhood committee ruling on private property. It was another one of her manipulative moves to confuse and pressure me. But I wasn't going to back down. I told her to leave and reminded her that she was trespassing again. She smiled and said, "Well, if you want to get the police involved, go ahead. Let's see who they believe." It wasn't just arrogance, it was a challenge. After she left, I checked the security footage. It showed her walking onto my lawn, carrying tools and a bag of flower bulbs, then starting to dig. I saved the footage in 2 separate drives, just in case. I decided that this was it. I'd had enough of playing polite. I printed out the property map, highlighted the lawn area, and labeled it with clear, bold letters showing it belonged to me. I posted it in a waterproof sleeve on a small sign at the edge of the lawn. The next morning, the sign was gone. I checked the camera. Karen had taken it at night. That's when I knew this was more than entitlement. She had a problem with being told no. She saw that lawn as a place where she could assert her control, and anyone standing in her way had to be pushed out. It wasn't about grass. It was about dominance. But I wasn't going to give in. So, I went a step further. I scheduled a meeting with the city zoning office. I brought all the documents, the property deed, photographs, surveyor maps, everything. The city official was understanding and confirmed that the lawn was 100% part of my property. He even offered to send me an official letter stating the same, which I could use for any future disputes. I asked him if there was anything I could do to prevent her from stepping on my lawn again. He suggested a no trespassing sign and said that repeated violations could be reported formally. That same day, I put up 2 large signs, one on each end of the lawn, bright, visible, and clear. Private property, no trespassing area under surveillance. I figured Karen might try to tear those signs down again. So, I went a step further and embedded a GPS tracker inside each signpost. If they moved, I'd know. And sure enough, that night, my app pinged. She had tried to remove one sign but struggled to pull it out because I had buried it deeper and reinforced it with a cement base. The camera caught her on video, yanking at the sign, looking over her shoulder like a thief. The best part? She didn't notice the camera I'd recently installed on the upper window, facing the entire yard. I had a perfect view of everything. The next day, I printed out stills from the footage and attached them next to the sign, along with the short line, "Smile, you're on camera." After that, things got quiet for about 3 days. Then came the twist. I was on my way back from the grocery store when I saw Karen standing with a man didn't recognize. He had a clipboard and was measuring distances from the curb to the edge of the lawn. I pulled into the driveway and walked over, asking what was going on. Karen said, "I've hired a private land consultant. He's going to prove that this property line is incorrect." The consultant looked a little uncomfortable. I asked to see his credentials, and he showed me his card. He was legitimate, but he also told me that the city's documents were the final authority, and that unless a legal case was filed and won, nothing could be changed. Karen smirked and said, "We'll see." I knew then that she was preparing to escalate. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail. Karen was attempting to sue for an easement claim. She wanted to claim that she had used the lawn long enough to have some legal right to it. It was laughable. But I didn't take it lightly. I hired a lawyer and gave him all the documentation and security footage. He assured me it was a weak case, but we'd prepare fully. Meanwhile, Karen became more passive-aggressive. She would walk her dog to the very edge of the lawn, letting it do its business right at the boundary. She'd stare at my cameras. Once, she even waved. Then she started having deliveries dropped off at her house, but left boxes right next to the property line, half on the lawn. When I moved one of the boxes to her porch, she claimed I'd tampered with her mail. I installed another camera on that side of the lawn. The day of the court hearing arrived. Karen showed up with a folder and a smug look, but the judge didn't entertain much of her argument. He looked at the documents I provided, reviewed the video footage, and within 20 minutes, dismissed her case. Karen's face fell. The judge even warned her that any further trespassing could be seen as harassment. As we stepped out of the courtroom, she didn't look at me. She stormed out, lips tight, holding back rage. I thought maybe this would be the end of it, but it wasn't. That night, I heard a noise outside. I rushed to the window and saw Karen pacing on the sidewalk, yelling into her phone. She was shouting something about unfair treatment and lawyers who didn't know anything. Then she saw me looking and pointed at the lawn again, like she was still trying to win an invisible argument. I didn't go out. I just watched. Eventually, she walked away. But I had the footage. I called the police the next day and filed an official complaint. They said they would issue a formal warning. Karen didn't step on my lawn again, but she did one more thing. 1. morning, I stepped outside and saw a small white flag planted at the edge of the grass. It had the words, "You win," scribbled in red ink. I took it, smiled, and tossed it in the bin, but I knew one thing for sure: Karen never gave up because she was right. She gave up because the cameras never stopped rolling. Things escalated even more dramatically when Karen began bringing visitors to her front lawn. She'd host casual chats there, sometimes even placing a small folding chair right in the middle of the grass. One Saturday morning, she hosted what looked like a yard sale on the edge of my lawn, completely without my permission. My kids were staring out the window confused, asking why strangers were walking across our grass, picking up things, and handing money to Karen. That was the last straw for me. I walked out calmly and asked her, "Karen, why are you having a sale on my property?" She smiled and said, "You're mistaken. This is shared ground. I can use it how I want." I asked her if she had any proof, anything at all, a deed or map, to support her claim. She snapped back, "I don't need paperwork. I've lived here longer than you." That logic made absolutely no sense. I was stunned not because of the argument itself, but by her sheer confidence in such a baseless claim. That evening, I reviewed all the camera footage again, not just for proof, but to try to understand her behavior. What I found was something even more disturbing. Karen had been sneaking out at night with a flashlight and measuring tape. She had been walking along the edge of the lawn, mumbling to herself and measuring imaginary boundaries in the dark. She even placed little white pebbles in a line across the middle of the lawn, as if she was drawing her version of the border between our homes. I started to realize this might not just be stubbornness. Maybe there was something deeper going on. I showed the footage to my wife. She was alarmed, but agreed with me. We had to keep handling this calmly. We didn't want to escalate anything or embarrass her if something was wrong mentally. But we also couldn't let her continue crossing the line, literally and figuratively. The next day, I invited a local mediator, a neighborhood liaison who helps with small property or community disputes. We arranged a meeting in neutral territory, the community center. Karen agreed to come, and I brought all my documentation and some printed photos from the security footage. Karen showed up in a large sun hat and sunglasses like she was arriving at a summer picnic. She sat down and crossed her arms tightly, already in defense mode. The mediator asked us both to calmly explain the situation. I laid everything out: the property lines, the surveys, the video proof, and the interactions we'd had. I remained respectful throughout. When it was Karen's turn, she spoke passionately, saying things like, "I've lived here for 15 years and watched that lawn grow. It's part of my daily walk. It belongs to me emotionally." The mediator tried to redirect her to facts, not feelings, but Karen refused to budge. When shown the footage of her measuring at night and placing pebbles, she claimed it was part of a meditation practice. The mediator, trying hard not to let out a laugh, simply noted her statement. Eventually, the mediator sided clearly with me. He politely explained that no emotional connection or imagined boundary could override legal documentation. He suggested Karen avoid walking or placing anything on my lawn going forward. Karen didn't respond. She stood up, looked at me with narrowed eyes, and walked out without another word. For a week, everything was calm. Karen stayed off the lawn. No new decorations, no trash bins, no nightly measuring. I thought we were finally done. Until a week later, I woke up to find a sign planted in the grass that read, "Under dispute, do not touch," in bold red letters. She had somehow ordered or printed a protest sign and stuck it dead center in the front lawn. My patience was running thin, but instead of reacting, I took a picture, removed the sign, and stored it in the garage. I decided it was time to go beyond community mediators. I scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney. I brought everything: the deeds, surveys, videos, and even the protest sign. The attorney agreed to help file an official cease and desist order and draft a letter that would serve as legal warning if the behavior continued. We hand-delivered the letter to Karen's home. I watched from my window as she opened it, read a few lines, and then crumpled it. She looked up toward my house, shook her head, and slammed the door. I thought maybe the letter had finally scared her off. But then came the breaking point. One rainy evening, I returned from work and stepped out of my car. As I approached the house, I noticed something odd. The lawn looked dug up like someone had tried to dig a trench. I ran closer and saw shallow holes along the grass, like someone had tried to create a line. And there she was, Karen, standing in her own driveway, soaking wet in a raincoat, watching me. She didn't speak, just stared. I shouted over the rain, "What are you doing?" She said, "I was just checking the drainage. You'll thank me later." At that moment, I knew I had to escalate. I called the police non-emergency line and asked for an officer to come out to document the damage. They arrived, reviewed the footage from my security cameras, and wrote up an incident report. The officer gently tried to speak with Karen, but she denied everything, claimed the holes were caused by natural erosion. The officer warned her not to enter my property again. He explained that the next report would not just be documentation, it could lead to charges. Karen stood quietly, but her eyes were filled with rage. We spent the next few days repairing the lawn, reseeding where necessary. My kids were frightened to even play out front. My wife was worried Karen might do something worse. I installed extra lights, added another camera, and even placed a motion alert system at the edge of the yard. One evening, around p.m., the motion alert pinged my phone. I opened the live feed, and there she was again. Karen, just standing at the edge of the lawn, staring, not stepping on it, just watching. She did that for almost 5 minutes before finally turning and walking back into her house. I couldn't believe how far this had gone over a patch of grass. It wasn't about the lawn anymore. It had become a bizarre power struggle. And what happened next? Well, that changed everything. I didn't expect what happened next. Just as I was standing at the edge of my driveway the next morning, sipping on a cup of coffee, Karen's husband pulled up. I had never met him before, and I assumed maybe he was here to clear up the whole mess. I stayed calm, gave a small nod, and waited. He stepped out of his car with a strange, stiff smile and walked over. "I heard there's been some confusion," he said. I nodded. "Yes, your wife believes our lawn belongs to her." He looked down, shuffled his feet, and then said something that surprised me. "I just want peace." She told me what happened, but I've seen the footage. You're right. And frankly, I'm tired of this sort of drama. I was stunned. It was like hearing the truth from someone on the other side for the first time. He explained that Karen had a habit of exaggerating, sometimes even convincing herself of things that weren't true. He apologized on her behalf, said he'd talk to her, and promised it wouldn't happen again. I appreciated the honesty, but wasn't fully convinced. Too many incidents had already happened. Still, I decided to give him a chance. For a few days, things were quiet. Karen didn't come out yelling. No more notes, no more police visits, no more rants, just silence. It was almost peaceful, but peace doesn't last long when someone thrives on chaos. A week later, I came home from work to find my lawn dug up. Not just mowed, literally dug. Chunks of soil were missing. The flower bed was trampled, and my garden gnome was broken in half like a snapped twig. I couldn't believe my eyes. I rushed to the security feed and fast-forwarded to the morning, and there she was, Karen, in full gardening gear, shovel in hand, with a small red wagon behind her. She was digging into my lawn like she was planting her own flower bed. It wasn't just property damage now. This was trespassing. This was vandalism. And she didn't care that the cameras were rolling, or maybe she thought she was above it all. This time, I didn't call the police. I called a lawyer. Within days, I had filed for a restraining order. I compiled every video, every note, every time-stamped police report. I was done playing nice. My lawyer assured me that with all the evidence, it was only a matter of time before the courts issued a no-contact order. News of the restraining order spread fast in the neighborhood. People who had once turned a blind eye now reached out to share their own stories. Karen had done this before to others. She had claimed boundaries, started fights over shared fences, even accused a family of stealing her lawn decorations. But I was the first one to collect the evidence and take her to court. At the hearing, Karen showed up with a dramatic flair, dressed like she was heading to a funeral. She cried, claimed she was the victim, said she had been harassed by unfriendly neighbors, but my lawyer calmly presented the video evidence, footage after footage of her stepping onto my lawn, yelling, digging, vandalizing. Her face changed as each clip played. Her confidence wavered. The judge, a serious-looking woman in her 50s, finally spoke. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "this isn't a dispute over a property line. This is targeted harassment." The restraining order was granted. She was forbidden from stepping onto my property, speaking to me, or even approaching within 100 feet of my home. Her husband looked like he wanted to disappear into the bench. I felt relief. Finally, a boundary, a real one enforced by law. But the story didn't end there. A local news station caught wind of the court case. Apparently, stories like "this neighborhood disputes caught on camera" were great for evening segments. A reporter came by, asked if I'd be willing to share the footage and tell my side. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want the drama to escalate. But the truth deserved to be heard, especially for others who had dealt with similar harassment and didn't know what to do. So I agreed. The segment aired a few nights later. They showed the videos, blurred faces, and summarized the events in a calm, professional tone. But it was clear Karen looked bad. The story was titled, "Caught on Camera, Neighborhood Feud Over Lawn Turns Legal." The next day, I woke up to dozens of messages. Friends, coworkers, even strangers on social media. Some people shared their own stories. Others just said, "Good for you." I didn't care about the fame, but I did care about standing up for myself and maybe helping someone else find the courage to do the same. Karen didn't leave her house for a while after that. Her husband started doing all the errands, and they kept their distance. The restraining order had consequences, and finally, I could enjoy my lawn without looking over my shoulder. The neighborhood, strangely enough, began to shift. People were kinder, more talkative. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now said hello when walking by. It was as if one loud voice had been silenced, and everyone else could finally breathe. Months passed. One afternoon, I was watering the flowers, the ones Karen had once trampled, when I noticed something taped to my mailbox. A letter. My heart raced as I opened it, half expecting another rant. But it wasn't from Karen. It was from her husband. He wrote that they were moving. He apologized again. He said the house was too full of bad memories now, and that they needed a fresh start. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Relief? Maybe a bit of both. A week later, a moving truck pulled up, and by the end of the day, the house was empty. Just like that, Karen was gone. It's strange, the peace that followed. I could finally enjoy the little things again, planting flowers, trimming the bushes, waving to neighbors. The lawn was just a lawn again. Nothing more, nothing less. But in my mind, the whole experience became something bigger, a reminder that standing up, even when it's uncomfortable, is worth it. That boundaries matter. That truth, when backed by evidence and courage, always finds its way to light. And as I sat one evening, looking at the grass that started it all, I smiled. The lawn hadn't changed, but I had.